One of the things that I wanted to do with this channel is share, and hopefully in doing so promote, rural culture, and a big part of that is young farmers clubs. Young farmers clubs are where tractor boy meets horse girl, very much a rural institution. It's where my parents met, it's where my grandparents met, and this continues as periodically young farmers from all over the country descend on Britain's seaside towns, representing their clubs with coloured shirts with slogans on the back. You could almost have an episode on rural fashion. Young farmers is kind of like a subculture. They have these two-tone shorts and neon glasses, or if you're really dressing up, a quarter zip or a shuffle. The organisation is a federation of local clubs, and they compete with other clubs in their county in competitions as wide-ranging as dance choreography and drama, bale stacking, chicken plucking, block paving, debating, model making, putting on frozen overalls, bale throwing, trailer reversing, all sorts. And there's a league table every year and lots of trophies to be won, and they have lots of parties in barns. It's all very agricultural. The organisation does have some historical significance because agriculture is a scientific exercise, so young farmers clubs are a good way of getting new technologies and practices onto farms, as if you give the young people a lecture, they'll go home and argue with their parents about it. So you get pamphlets like this one on horse nutrition, or this one on stock judging, which is how to look for good attributes in animals. The organisation does exchange programmes with sister organisations all around the world, and there's 581 clubs in this country, so if you're young and bored, it is something worth checking out. It is a fascinating little ecosystem, but one that I think is founded on a fundamentally good idea, and their slogan is you don't have to be a farmer to be a young farmer. There are people from all different walks of life involved in this. And as much as living in the countryside is very beautiful, it can be quite a solitary existence, so these clubs really help with loneliness and mental health issues in farming that we'll talk about in the future. The biggest date in the Young Farmers calendar is the rally, where a lot of the competitions take place. And this is something that we have built for the rally. The competition instructions are as follows. Design and build a mechanical catapult to propel a watermelon towards a target approximately 25 metres away. In true agricultural style, this has been done in a very unprofessional manner, but I'll show you how we did it. We used to have a steel frame shed which passed away after my grandfather drove into it, but I thought its remains might have lots of convenient metal triangles, so we dug it out of the undergrowth. So we laid everything out to have a look and decided that these frames were usable, which saved us a lot of work. But before we could stick it all together, it needed a base, so we cut these steels to length and arranged them in such a way that would hopefully correspond to the bed of my mate's trailer. Then we could grind off the rusty patches in the corners and weld it together. I'm not a particularly good welder, but I can do basic jobs. If something falls apart, I can generally stick it back together. So once the base was done, we had to attach the roof trusses. It was tricky to get these perfectly upright, but when we were happy with it, we stuck some weld on and it seemed to hold. So we are going against the instructions in that we're building a trebuchet rather than a catapult, so it will work by having the melon held in a sling that will release as the arm goes over the top of the machine, which we'll see in a bit. We're hoping the person who wrote the instructions hasn't thought of this distinction. Once we'd attached the other old roof truss, we welded two diagonal supports to the outside of the frame. We haven't done any maths whatsoever in the design or building of this thing, we're just using what we've got, but we noticed that the roof trusses had these convenient boxes on the top that we could slide a bar through to act as a pivot for the arm. Then we were going to attach the arm. We noticed that the frame was a bit wobbly, but it wasn't that the welds were bad, it was the whole frame flexing, so we decided that we'd add some more support later on, and once it was in place, the arm seemed to swing really freely. Next up, we wanted to attach some weight to see if it would all work properly, so we got a tractor weight and chained it to the bottom of the arm. One of these weighs 45 kilos, I think. But we soon realised we had a problem because the weight wanted to sit perpendicular to the gap in the frame. So we needed a different way of fixing it because as it was, it wouldn't fit back through the gap. We went and got a bracket that could suspend two tractor weights in such a way that they wouldn't twist across the frame. In hindsight, it would have been easier to do this with a second chain, but we hadn't worked that out yet. But the mechanism does seem to work pretty well, and it's powerful enough that the whole frame jumps. After this, we welded an extension on the arm so the melon travels further, and we built a winch mechanism to pull it down safely, which works very well, but we didn't quite think it through because it's basically impossible to attach the hook on the winch to the top of the arm when the arm's vertical because it's really high up. We decided at this point that although the mechanism worked very well, we could do with a better way of attaching the weights. But on the whole, we were quite happy with what we'd done, so I welded some supports onto the frame and started painting it our club colours. The first coat of yellow looks appalling, but that fits, I think. So then we were on to the tricky bit, which was to make a sling that released the melon at the right time.
Oh. Well, that didn't work.
It was a learning curve, of course.
Well, it worked. It's
But after a while, we built a second sling, which did work better.
yes!
After a few attempts and a bit of fine-tuning, it was starting to get dark, but it was consistently throwing the basketball we were using forwards, about 15 to 20 metres.
Fucking it.
So on the whole, we were happy with it at this point, but it needs to throw heavier stuff further. It's just not quite good enough yet. But we hadn't finished painting it yet, so we got some blue paint and wrote the club's name on the side. We weren't quite sure what to put on the other side, and we messed the spacing up a little bit, but we had the letters for the club's name and Young Farmers, and we figured if you turn the M upside down, you could just spell something else. And with that, the trebuchet was christened. This time we were throwing a football full of stones, which is more like a melon in terms of weight. And again, it worked well, but it wasn't throwing it quite as far as we wanted, so something needs to change. I think it probably just needs more weight on it to give it more power, but changing the length of the arm might make a difference. The rally is still a couple of weeks away, and as I said, no maths whatsoever has gone into the construction of this thing, so any tips would be more than welcome. I think it just needs more weight. But do subscribe, because in a couple of weeks we'll take this thing to the Farmer Olympics and you'll see what all of the other clubs have been doing.